There was one step I knew I should take. I didn't misunderstand it. I didn't overlook it. I saw it clearly, repeatedly, for years. And every time, I chose to stay. 10 seconds into this confession, here is the truth I avoided admitting. I didn't lose my life because I made the wrong move. I lost it because I refused to make the right one when it mattered. Leaving didn't mean running away. It didn't mean giving up. It meant walking away from something that was slowly hollowing me out, a life that looked stable from the outside but felt suffocating on the inside. I told myself staying was the responsible choice. People depended on me. Things weren't that bad. Every situation has its difficulties. I repeated those sentences so often they stopped sounding like excuses. They sounded like facts. From the outside, my life made sense. There was structure. Continuity. Familiar routines. No chaos. No scandal. No dramatic failure. I did what was expected, said what was appropriate, showed up where I was supposed to. Inside, I felt like I was slowly disappearing. Not dramatically. Gradually. Like something leaking out of me day by day. The step I avoided wasn't heroic. It didn't promise success or happiness. It only promised honesty. The honesty of admitting that what I was living was no longer aligned with who I was becoming. But honesty has consequences. It disappoints people. It destabilizes plans. It forces change before you feel ready. So I delayed. I told myself I just needed more patience. More effort. More adjustment. That if I tried harder, the discomfort would fade and things would fall back into place. They didn't. They calcified. Days turned into years, and the quiet discomfort turned into a permanent background hum. I learned how to live with it. How to function without listening to it. How to drown it out with responsibility and routine. I became very good at enduring. That endurance was praised. You're strong. You stick it out. You don't run when things get hard. No one asked if the hardness was slowly killing me. I stopped asking too. The idea of leaving never went away. It resurfaced at night, in moments of silence, in flashes of clarity I quickly suppressed. Each time it appeared, it brought the same feeling, relief mixed with fear. Relief, because it felt like air. Fear, because it meant admitting everything I had built might not be right. Leaving would mean loss. Loss of identity. Loss of approval. Loss of the narrative that said I was doing the right thing. Staying meant safety. And slow decay. I chose safety. I told myself there would be a better moment. A cleaner exit. A time when leaving would hurt less people, create less damage, require less courage. That moment never came. Life doesn't pause while you wait to be brave. Instead, it quietly raises the stakes. The longer I stayed, the harder it became to leave. The more intertwined everything became. The more people assumed permanence. The more my hesitation turned into obligation. I wasn't trapped by force. I was trapped by time. I remember moments when I almost did it. When the words were right there, ready to be spoken. When my body leaned toward movement and my mind screamed now. And then I didn't. I swallowed the truth. Smiled. Stayed. Each time I stayed, something inside me weakened. Not visibly. Internally. I started feeling disconnected from my own reactions. I responded automatically, without emotion. Joy felt muted. Anger felt pointless. Hope felt distant. I told myself this was adulthood. It wasn't. It was resignation. The cost of staying didn't arrive all at once. It arrived in fragments, missed chances, emotional numbness, a growing sense that I was living someone else's version of my life. I didn't collapse. I endured. And endurance can look a lot like strength, right up until you realize it has replaced living entirely. The step I avoided didn't disappear. It waited. Patiently. And I didn't yet understand that every year I refused to take it, it demanded more from me in return. The moment I realized staying was destroying me didn't come with clarity. It came with exhaustion. Not the kind sleep fixes. The kind that settles into your bones and changes how you move through the world. I woke up tired, went to bed tired, and carried that weight everywhere in between. Nothing was technically wrong. Nothing had broken. That made it worse. Because when nothing is broken, leaving looks unjustified. I told myself I was overreacting. That everyone feels like this sometimes. That discomfort is part of commitment. That meaning comes from endurance, not escape. Those ideas kept me in place. They also kept me silent. I stopped sharing how I felt. There was no language for it that didn't sound dramatic or ungrateful. How do you explain that a life can be stable and still be wrong? That something can look like success and feel like suffocation? So I internalized it. I learned to smile at the right moments. To respond appropriately. To say, "I'm fine," in a way that ended conversations. I became reliable, predictable, emotionally contained. People stopped asking deeper questions. I trained them well. The step I avoided began to show up differently. Less like an option, more like a warning. I noticed how often I imagined myself elsewhere, not in fantasy, but in relief. A version of me that had already left, already dealt with the fallout, already survived the consequences. That imagined version didn't look happy. It looked lighter. I told myself it was escapism. But escapism doesn't usually feel that grounded. The truth was, I wasn't afraid of the unknown anymore. I was afraid of admitting how much of myself I had already lost by staying. I started to see the damage clearly. My reactions were duller. My curiosity weaker. My sense of direction almost gone. I wasn't growing. I was maintaining. Preserving something that no longer deserved preservation. And the worst part? The people around me thought everything was fine. Because I made sure it was. I absorbed the strain quietly. Took responsibility for keeping things smooth. Managed expectations. Prevented conflict before it started. The more I did that, the more invisible my struggle became. I wasn't trapped by others. I was trapped by the version of myself I had convinced everyone to believe in. The step I avoided now felt heavier. Not because it was harder to take, but because it revealed how long I had known. How many moments I had ignored. How many times I had chosen comfort over honesty. I began to grieve before anything was officially lost. Grieve the years I would never get back. Grieve the energy I had poured into surviving instead of living. Grieve the version of myself that had learned to endure quietly. That grief didn't push me to leave. It froze me. Because leaving now would mean admitting that staying had already cost too much. That the sacrifice hadn't been noble. That endurance hadn't been strength. And that terrified me. It's easier to believe suffering has meaning than to admit it was unnecessary. I reached a point where staying no longer felt neutral. It felt active. Like a decision I was making every day to abandon myself in small, socially acceptable ways. The realization hit hard one evening, without warning. I was doing something ordinary, something I had done 1,000 times, and suddenly I felt an overwhelming sense of wrongness. Not discomfort. Not boredom. Wrongness. As if my body finally refused to cooperate with the story I had been telling it. I felt trapped not by circumstances, but by my own delay. And in that moment, I understood something that terrified me. Even if I left now, I would still lose. But if I stayed, I would lose everything quietly. My sense of self. My future choices. My ability to recognize myself in my own life. The step I avoided was no longer about change. It was about survival. And for the first time, staying felt more dangerous than leaving. I wasn't brave yet. But I was out of excuses. And I could feel a final moment approaching, one where not choosing would no longer be an option, because life itself would choose for me. I didn't leave in a moment of clarity. I left in a moment of honesty. There was no dramatic argument. No final straw that made the decision obvious. Just a quiet understanding that if I stayed one more day, I would continue a slow erasure I could no longer pretend was temporary. The step I had avoided for years finally became unavoidable, not because I felt ready, but because I felt finished. When I took it, nothing exploded. That was the strangest part. The world didn't collapse. The people I feared disappointing adjusted. Some were confused. Some were hurt. A few were relieved. Life reorganized itself faster than I had imagined, as if it had been waiting for me to stop holding everything in place. And I stood there, watching, realizing how much weight I had been carrying unnecessarily. The moment after leaving was not freedom. It was emptiness. A raw, echoing quiet where the structure of my old life used to be. I had fantasized about relief for so long that I wasn't prepared for the absence that followed. Without the familiar routines and obligations, I felt exposed. Undefined. Almost weightless in a way that bordered on frightening. For the first time in years, no one needed me to be anything specific. And without that demand, I didn't know who I was. The guilt came in waves. Guilt for leaving. Guilt for hurting people. Guilt for not enduring longer. For choosing myself after so many years of choosing stability. At night, doubt whispered relentlessly. You should have stayed. You should have tried harder. You should have waited for a better moment. Those thoughts hurt because they sounded reasonable. But underneath them was a quieter truth. If I had stayed, I wouldn't have been waiting for a better moment. I would have been waiting for myself to disappear completely. The emptiness didn't vanish quickly. I had to learn how to sit inside it without rushing to fill it with another version of endurance. I had to resist the urge to rebuild a cage just because it felt familiar. Slowly, something else began to emerge. Not happiness. Presence. I noticed how my body felt when I woke up. How my thoughts moved when they weren't immediately assigned to someone else's needs. How emotions surfaced without being filtered through responsibility. They were messy. Unimpressive. Human. But they were mine. I began to understand something I couldn't see before. Leaving didn't fix my life. It stopped the damage. It gave me space to rebuild without pretending that survival was success. To grieve what I had lost without justifying the loss as necessary. To acknowledge that staying had cost me more than leaving ever could. I lost things by leaving. Security. Familiarity. Approval. But I also lost the constant tension of living against myself. The quiet shame of knowing I was choosing comfort over truth every day. The exhaustion of maintaining a life that no longer fit. For the first time in years, my choices began to feel intentional instead of defensive. Not perfect. Intentional. I don't romanticize what I did. Leaving was not a victory. It didn't make me brave overnight. It didn't erase regret or guarantee a better future. What it did was stop the slow death of postponement. If you're listening to this and you recognize yourself, staying because it's easier to endure than to disrupt, telling yourself it's not bad enough to leave, hear this carefully. Sometimes the cost of staying is invisible until you've paid it in full. Sometimes endurance is not strength. It's fear wearing discipline's clothes. I avoided one step for most of my life. I told myself it was loyalty. Responsibility. Maturity. In the end, it was self-abandonment. Leaving didn't give me answers. It gave me a chance to ask real questions for the first time. Who am I without this life? What do I want when no one is watching? What does it mean to live honestly, even if it costs me comfort? I don't have all those answers yet. But I know this. I would rather face uncertainty as myself than live another day as someone I outgrew years ago. I avoided one step, and it cost me everything I couldn't afford to lose. Taking it didn't save me. It stopped me from disappearing. And for now, that is enough to keep going.